certainly do. He gives his budget address every year. You know, if you would have heard his State of the Budget address this year, you would have think that everything in the entire state of Illinois is just fine. But the reality is, after 5 years under the Quinn leadership and 10 years of the Blagojevich-Quinn leadership, what he doesn't say is that we still have a backlog of bills. So it fluctuates between $6 and $7 billion in backlog of bills. So if you're a nursing home or a hospital or somebody that provides service on the good faith that the state will pay you, they've been waiting months and months, and that is a sin. Under the Quinn administration, we continue to have the worst funded pension in the entire country. Now, Sherry talked a little bit about the pension. I sat on the governor's pension working group with Senator Brady. It's an important issue, one that I knew I needed to know more about. So I spent about a year on the governor's working group. And it's always interesting when everybody's at the table, you learn really a lot about the history and how we got here. And my colleagues across the aisle like to say, well, this is a decades-long problem that we've been underfunding the pension for decades and decades. Well, the reality is that under Blagojevich and Quinn, before Blagojevich came into office, our pensions were funded at 70%. 70%. Under Blagojevich and Quinn, because of the state legislature failure to pay for pension, we've gone down to 39% funding in our pension system. And that happens when you pass legislation in 2005 along party lines with not one Republican vote, all Democrat votes, to miss pension payments. $4 billion worth of pension payments were missed in 2005, and this is something I talk a lot about every time I'm out speaking to groups. And TRS testified before that committee, and in their testimony they said, do not miss this pension payment. The $4 billion in missed pension payment mean in 30 years we'll have it will add $50 billion to our unfunded liability. So what happened? The vote was taken, and along party lines, the Democrats voted to miss pension payments. Now, my mom's a retired teacher. She's actually a retired superintendent. I have heard for many years how she's planned for her pension, that everything, her mortgage, her health payments, everything that she does, she knows exactly how much money she's going to receive when she retires with her pension. So to miss pension payments and to have such a severely unfunded pension payment, the worst in the country, it is, if you did this in the private sector, you would be in jail. It is literally illegal if you did this in the private sector. But for some reason, in the private sector, when the state misses the pension payment, everybody gives themselves a slap on the back and says, oh, gee, golly, we're just borrowing, but we'll make sure we pay it back. Well, guess what? The money never got paid back, and now we're in the situation where we have 39%, our pensions are funded at 39%. That is not acceptable. Under Governor Quinn, we had the largest income tax increase in the history of the state, 67% income tax increase that is about to roll off. Not one Republican voted for that. But the debate on the floor at 1:30 in the morning, because I just came in, I was a young senator at the time. But the first week I came into office, lame duck. And so that's one of the votes we took. And the debate on the floor by President Cullerton, he says, if you pass the income tax increase, our credit rating will increase. If you pass this income tax increase, we will no longer have a backlog of bills. Well, guess what? Our credit rating's been downgraded 14 times under Blagojevich and Quinn. Just to put that in perspective, our credit rating in the history of the state has been downgraded 20 times. 14 times under Blagojevich and Quinn. Our backlog of bills continue to grow. So when the new income tax increase was passed along party lines, that generated approximately $26 billion in new revenue coming into the budget. My friends across the aisle like to call it revenue, but Republicans call it taxes out of hardworking middle-class families. So we had $26 billion in new taxes come into the budget. However, our governor cannot still fund education to its full amount because of that. And we talk about education funding a lot. I sit on education, and I also sit on the education funding task force to look at how we fund schools. And we hear a lot, especially from school school districts on this side of my district that when the state says, you know, I'm going to give you X amount for your funding this year, according to the formula. So if you talk to your superintendents, they're going to do their budget, and everything that they plan for the year is based on that budget. And then the governor comes in at the last month and says, oh, by the way, didn't quite have enough money to pay you this year. I'm only giving you 89%. So what do superintendents have to do? They have to go back to their budget, and they have to figure out how they can come up with hundreds of thousands, sometimes $1 million, to cover the state's inability to fully fund education. So if you talk to a candidate or an official that's been in office that has supported these budgets, and they tell you that education is their priority, all I can say is follow the money. When that $26 billion of new revenue came in, do you know how much money went to education in new dollars? Any idea? Not one new dollar from that $26 billion from that income tax increase went into education. So when you talk about education funding priorities, ask them how they voted on the budget. Ask them if they supported it, if they supported the prorations of the school.